Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Before we get into tonight's game, I wanted to talk about this video's sponsor, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon offers a deliciously nostalgic, high-protein, no-sugar cereal for breakfast. However, did you also know that Magic Spoon also carries treats? Their treats are keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, contain no artificial colors or sweeteners, and contain only 1 gram of sugar and 12 grams of protein. Magic Spoon's treats are crispy, crunchy, and airy without the chewy stickiness of a protein bar. Their treats fit a variety of diets with high protein, no sugar, and 1 to 2 grams of net carbs. They are great for carb-conscious lifestyles. They have flavors such as double chocolate, blueberry muffin, marshmallow, and my personal favorite, chocolate peanut butter. They also have brand new high-protein granola that keeps the Magic Spoon promise. They contain 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugar in delicious flavors like honey almond and peanut butter. At the end of a long day, I'm beat, and I'll be honest with you, I don't eat super well when I'm watching TV. Magic Spoon's treats have helped me snack while laying on the couch without the guilt of other less healthy options. So try out Magic Spoon's treats and granola today. Use my code PWPMTG or click on the link in the description to try Magic Spoon treats or granola today and get $5 off. You can also find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. And Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, it's backed by a 100% happiness guarantee online. So if you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money, no questions asked. So click on the link in the description or go to magicspoon.com/PWPMTG or scan the QR code on the screen for $5 off. When you support our sponsors, this helps bring you more content just like tonight's game. So thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring today's video. We recently attended MagicCon Chicago and met all kinds of awesome people. We also recorded games with fans while we were there. Tonight's game is one of those recordings. Tonight's Fighter Showcase is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get 5% off of your order when you pick up Dragon Shield products in the link in the description below. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ryan piloting Nixilis, Captive Kingpin. This deck seeks to gain card advantage through the use of its commander and effects that deal 1 damage. It then closes out the game with cards like Dualcaster Twin Flame or All Will Be One. Next, we have Mark piloting Magda, Brazen Outlaw. This deck seeks to generate a bunch of treasures to tutor artifacts with its commander. It then uses Clock of Omens to go infinite and win the game. After that, we have Aaron piloting Elsha of the Infinite. This deck seeks to cast a bunch of cards off of the top of its library through the use of its commander. It then tries to resolve an Underworld Breach line to win the game. Finally, we have Chris piloting the partner pair of Thrasios Triton Hero and Tevesh Zod Doom of Fools. This deck seeks to grind advantage and overwhelm opponents. It then tries to resolve either Hullbreak or Horror Loops or a classic Thassa's Oracle line. A huge thanks to Dragon Shield, Wizards of the Coast, and everyone else who made MagicCon Chicago possible. We had a wonderful time and this video would not be possible without it. So be sure to show them your support as well as all of our sponsors by checking out the links below. Or help us out for free by liking, subscribing, and commenting about your favorite convention you've ever attended. Without further ado, let's kick off the Sheltered Shiny Chicago Shuffle. Mark ate the most Chicago-style pizza and gets to start us off. Mark draws a card for turn and plays a Hammerheim. The table scratches their head as to why that card is in the deck, and Mark passes. Aaron draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He taps it to cast Esper Sentinel. He casts a Mox Amber. He casts a Mox Opal. He passes. Chris draws, plays a City of Brass, and ends his turn. Ryan draws and plays a Sulphurous Springs. He casts Hope of Ghirapur and ships the turn. Mark draws and plays an Urza Saga, getting its first counter. He casts his commander, Magda, Brazen Outlaw. In response, Aaron casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 back on top. Magda resolves, and Mark ships the turn. Aaron draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He casts Tormod's Crypt. He taps Mana Confluence to help cast an Arcane Signet. Aaron gives the turn to Chris. Chris draws and plays a Gloom Lake Verge. He taps City of Brass to help cast his commander, Thrasios Triton Hero. Chris passes the turn. Ryan draws and plays a Swamp. He taps Sulphurous Springs to help cast Reckless Fireweaver. He moves to combat and attacks Chris with Hope of Ghirapur. Chris takes it, and Ryan gives the turn to Mark. Mark draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga gets another counter. He plays an Urza's Cave for turn. He moves to combat and attacks Aaron with Magda. Magda triggers, and Mark creates a treasure. Aaron takes it, and Mark ends his turn. Aaron draws and plays a City of Brass. He cracks his Wooded Foothills, pays a life, and fetches up a Tundra onto the battlefield. He taps City of Brass and Mana Confluence to help cast his commander, Elsha of the Infinite. He passes the turn. Chris draws and plays a Talon Gates of Madara as his land for turn. It triggers, and Chris phases out Elsha. He taps City of Brass to help cast a Talisman of Dominance. Chris passes. Ryan draws and casts Dark Ritual. Esper triggers and Aaron draws. Then Ryan adds 3 black. He taps Sulphurous Springs to help cast his commander, Nixilis, Captive Kingpin. He moves to combat and attacks Mark with Reckless Fireweaver and Chris with Hope of Ghirapur. They both take it, Nixilis triggers, gets a 1/1 counter, and Ryan exiles a Felwar Stone. Ryan passes the turn to Mark. Mark draws, and in his first main phase, Urza Saga triggers. He floats mana and sacrifices it, fetching up a Soul Ring onto the battlefield. He casts Bloodfire Dwarf. He moves to combat and attacks Aaron with Magda. Magda triggers and Mark creates a treasure. Then Aaron takes it and Mark ships the turn. Before Aaron untaps, Elsha phases back in. He draws and casts Narset, Parter of Veils. Elsha's prowess triggers and gets +1/+1. He activates Narset's ability, looking at the top 4 and revealing a Swords to Plowshares into his hand and putting the rest on bottom. He moves to combat and attacks Mark with Elsha. Mark takes 4, and Aaron passes to Chris. Chris draws and plays a Beseiju, who endures as his land for turn. He passes. Ryan draws and casts a Soul Ring. Esper triggers and Aaron draws. Soul Ring resolves, Reckless Fireweaver triggers, and each opponent takes 1. Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Jessica's Will. He moves to combat and attacks Chris with Hope of Girper. Chris takes it, Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Cabal Pit. In his second main phase, Ryan plays Cabal Pit from exile as his land for turn. He taps Sulphurous Springs to help cast Jessica's Will from exile, choosing both modes, targeting Chris. He adds 5 red and exiles a Mox Amber, Gemstone Caverns, and a Lotus Petal. He casts Lotus Petal from exile. In response, Aaron casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Nixilis. is exiled and Ryan gains 7 life. Lotus Petal resolves, Reckless Fireweaver triggers and deals 1 to each opponent. He casts Mox Amber from exile. Fireweaver triggers and deals 1 to each opponent. He taps Cabal Pit to help recast his commander, Nixilis. Unfortunately stopped, Ryan passes to Mark. Mark draws and plays a Gemstone Caverns for turn. He casts Universal Automaton. In response, Chris casts Deadly Relic for its alternate cost, targeting Magda. Esper triggers and Aaron draws. In response, Mark activates Urza's Cave, sacrificing it, fetching up a Talon Gates of Madara onto the battlefield. It triggers, phasing out Magda. Then Relic fizzles and Automaton resolves. Finished up, Mark passes. At the end of Mark's turn, Aaron taps City of Brass and Mana Confluence to help cast a Felwar Stone off of the top of his library through Elsha. Nixilis triggers twice, gets 2 counters, and Ryan exiles an Untimely Malfunction and a Mox Diamond. Stone resolves, and the turn moves to Aaron. Aaron draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts Cursed Totem. Elsha's Prowess triggers and gets +1/+1. Mark and Chris sink their head, and Cursed Totem resolves. He activates Narset, looking at the top 4 and revealing an Intuition into his hand. He casts Intuition, targeting Mark. Elsha gets +1/+1, and in response, Mark casts Red Elemental Blast. Esper triggers, and Mark pays. In response, Aaron taps City of Brass for mana. Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Grinding Station. Aaron flashes in a Counterbalance. Elsha gets +1/+1, then Red Blast counters Intuition. Aaron moves to combat and attacks Mark with Elsha. Mark takes 6, and Aaron ends his turn. Chris draws and moves to combat. He attacks Narset with Thrasios. Aaron blocks with Esper Sentinel. Esper dies, and in his second main phase, Chris casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Born Upon a Wind. He taps City of Brass for mana. Triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Slaughter Pact. Then Chris casts his other commander, Tevesh Zot, Doom of Fools. He activates Tevesh's first ability, creating 2 Thralls. Finished up, Chris passes to Ryan. Ryan draws and moves to combat. He attacks Aaron with Fireweaver and Narset with Hope. Aaron takes it, Narset dies, triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Kessig Flamebreather. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Kessig Flamebreather from exile. Counterbalance triggers, and Aaron reveals a Torpor Orb, countering Flamebreather. Next, Ryan taps Cabal Pit to help cast Glaring Fleshraker. He casts Mox Diamond from exile. Fleshraker triggers, and Ryan creates an Eldrazi spawn. Fleshraker triggers again, and Ryan deals 1 to each opponent. Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Coruscation Mage. Mox Diamond resolves, Ryan doesn't discard a land, and Mox Diamond goes to the graveyard. Next, Ryan casts Grinding Station from exile, knowing what's on top with Counterbalance. Fleshraker and Counterbalance trigger. Aaron reveals Torpor Orb, counters Grinding Station, Ryan creates an Eldrazi, Fleshraker deals 1 to each opponent, Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Final Fortune. Ryan casts Slaughter Pact from exile, targeting Elsha. In response, Aaron casts Mindbreak Trap for its alternate cost, exiling Pact. Next, Ryan casts Grape Shot with 2 copies targeting Mark, 2 targeting Aaron, and 3 targeting Chris. Counterbalance triggers and counters the original copy targeting Chris. Then each opponent takes 2, Nixilis triggers 6 times, gets 6 counters, and Ryan exiles a Cabal Ritual, Pyroblast, Sensei's Divining Top, Demonic Tutor, Dualcaster Mage, and a Twin Flame. Unfortunately for Ryan, he has run out of steam and has to pass the turn to Mark. Before Mark untaps, Magda phases back in. Mark draws and casts an Enslaved Dwarf. He moves to combat and attacks Tevesh with Automaton, Bloodfire Dwarf, and Magda. Magda triggers 3 times, and Mark creates 3 treasures. Chris blocks Magda with a Thrall, and Tevesh takes the rest. Stopped by the Cursed Totem, Mark ends his turn. Aaron draws and casts Torpor Orb. He passes. Chris draws and plays an Undergrowth Stadium. He activates Tevesh's second ability, sacrificing a Thrall and drawing 2 cards. He casts the One Ring. It enters, and Chris gains protection from everything. He activates the One Ring, adding a burning counter and drawing a card. Chris gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He moves to combat and attacks Mark with Hope of Girper and Aaron with Nixilis. Both declare no blocks, Mark takes 1, and Aaron takes 17 damage. Nixilis triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Vampiric Tutor. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Vampiric Tutor from exile. Counterbalance triggers, and Aaron reveals a Flusterstorm, countering the spell. Stopped again, Ryan passes. Mark draws and plays a City of Traitors. He moves to combat and attacks Tevesh with Enslaved Dwarf and Bloodfire Dwarf. Magda triggers twice and Mark creates 2 treasures. Chris blocks Bloodfire Dwarf with Thrasios and Tevesh takes the rest. In his second main phase, Mark casts Sudden Shock targeting Thrasios. Thrasios dies and Mark ships the turn to Aaron. Aaron draws and casts Chain of Vapor from the top of his library through Elsha, targeting his own Mox Amber. Amber bounces, Aaron sacks a land, copies the chain, targeting Mox Opal. Opal bounces, Aaron sacks a land, copies the chain, targeting Tormod's Crypt. Crypt bounces, and Aaron doesn't continue the chain. Next, Aaron casts Mox Opal. He casts Mox Amber. He casts Tormod's Crypt. He casts Jessica's Will from Exile, choosing both modes, targeting Ryan. Elsha triggers, and he holds priority, casting Soul Ring from the top of his library. Elsha gets +1/+1, then Ring resolves. Still holding priority, he casts Sensei's Divining Top from the top of his library. Elsha triggers, and in response, Ryan casts Red Elemental Blast targeting Elsha. In response, Aaron casts Flusterstorm with all copies targeting Blast. Elsha triggers, and in response, Chris taps City of Brass, but the damage is prevented from the One Ring. He casts Cyclonic Rift targeting Elsha. In response, Aaron casts Pyroblast targeting Rift. Elsha triggers, and with no other responses, Elsha gets +1/+1, Pyroblast counters Cyclonic Rift, Elsha gets +1/+1, Flusterstorm counters Red Elemental Blast, Elsha gets +1/+1, Sensei's Divining Top resolves, Elsha gets +1/+1, and finally, Jessica's Will resolves. Aaron adds 3 red, then exiles Polluted Delta, Windfall, and Copy Artifact. He plays Polluted Delta from exile for turn. He cracks it and pays a life. Ob triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Wheel of Fortune. Then Aaron fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts Windfall from exile. In response, Ryan flashes in and Orcish Bowmasters. Counterbalance triggers, and in response, Aaron activates Sensei's Divining Top, looking at and rearranging the top 3. Unfortunately, he could not find what he needed and ignores his counterbalance trigger. Orcish Bowmasters resolves, but doesn't trigger due to Torpor Orb. With Windfall still on the stack, and in an effort to save his board state, Mark casts Pyrokinesis, targeting Bowmasters, Hope of Girpur, and Fleshraker. The creatures die, and Windfall resolves. Each player discards their hand and draws 4. Next, Aaron casts Underworld Breach from the top of his library. He moves to combat and attacks Ryan with Elsha. Ryan takes 13 damage, and Aaron passes, sacrificing Underworld Breach. During his upkeep, Chris's One Ring triggers. To avoid Ob Nixilis, he responds by activating the One Ring, adding a counter, and drawing 2 cards. Then Chris loses 2 life. He draws and plays a Bayou. He activates Tevesh's first ability, creating 2 Thralls. He casts Talisman of Curiosity. Chris ships the turn. Ryan draws and casts Cataract Parasite. Counterbalance triggers, and in response, Aaron activates Sensei's Divining Top, drawing a card and putting top on top. Then he reveals Sensei's Divining Top through Counterbalance, countering Parasite. Next, Ryan casts Delayed Blast Fireball. In response, Aaron casts Pact of Negation, countering Fireball. He casts a Mox Opal. It enters, Fireweaver triggers, dealing 1 to each opponent. Ob triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Tainted Pact. Ryan attempts to move to combat, and in response, Mark flashes in a high-speed hover bike. It enters and triggers because it's an artifact and not a creature because of Torpor Orb, and then taps down Ryan's Ob Nixilis. Ryan passes the turn. Mark draws and plays a mountain. City of Traitors triggers, and he floats mana, then sacrifices it. He casts Clown Car, where X equals 0. He casts a Mana Vault. Counterbalance triggers, and Aaron reveals a Sensei's Divining Top, countering Mana Vault. He crews Clown Car 3 times. Magda triggers 3 times, and Mark creates 3 treasures. Finished up, Mark passes. During his upkeep, Aaron pays for his Pact of Negation. He draws and plays a Wooded Foothills. He casts Unwinding Clock. In response, Chris casts Mana Drain. Counterbalance triggers, and Aaron reveals a Power Balance, countering Mana Drain. Then Clock resolves. Aaron passes. At the end of Aaron's turn, Chris taps City of Brass and taps his creatures to help convoke Court of Calling, where X equals 4. Ob triggers, gets a counter, and Ryan exiles an Underworld Breach. Then Chris fetches up a Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, onto the battlefield. The turn moves to Chris. Aaron untaps his artifacts with Chris. During his upkeep, Chris loses 2 life to the One Ring. He draws and casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He activates the One Ring, adding a counter and drawing 3 cards. He plays a Rejuvenating Springs for turn. He activates Tevesh's first ability, creating 2 Thralls. Finished up, Chris passes. At the end of Chris's turn, Ryan activates Cabal Pit, sacrificing it, killing Magda. Ryan draws and plays a Phyrexian Tower. He moves to combat and attacks Aaron with Ob Nixilis. In response, Aaron casts Power Balance from the top of his library through Elsha. He looks at the next card, hoping to find an answer. He does not find it, takes the damage, and dies. In his second main phase, Ryan casts Underworld Breach from exile. In response, Chris casts Swan Song. Breach is countered, and Ryan creates a 2/2 bird. He casts Ragavan, Nimble Pilferer. Ryan ends his turn. Mark draws and plays a Survivor's Encampment. He recasts his commander, Magda. In response, Chris activates Yawgmoth, paying a life and sacrificing a Thrall. Ob Nixilis gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Tybalt's Trickery. Then Chris gives Universal Automaton a -1/-1 counter, killing it and drawing a card. He activates Yawgmoth again, paying a life, sacrificing a Thrall, killing Enslaved Dwarf, and drawing another card. Ob Nixilis gets a counter, and Ryan exiles a Wooded Foothills. With Magda still in the stack, Ryan casts Tybalt's Trickery from exile. Magda is countered, Mark mills 3, then reveals a Disruptor Flute, casting it. It enters, and Mark names Yawgmoth. Mark passes. At the end of Mark's turn, Chris casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. The turn moves to Chris. During his upkeep, Chris loses 3 life to the One Ring. He draws and activates the One Ring, adding a counter and drawing 4 cards. He recasts his commander, Thrasios. He casts Seedborn Muse. He activates Tevesh's second ability, sacrificing the Thrall and drawing 2 cards. He plays an Overgrown Tomb as his land for turn into play tapped. He passes, discarding to hand size. Chris untaps with Ryan through Seedborn. Ryan draws and casts Rending Volley, targeting Thrasios. In response, Chris activates the One Ring, adding a counter and drawing 5 cards. Then Chris hard casts Mental Misstep. Misstep resolves, but doesn't counter Volley because it cannot be countered. Unfortunately, Chris missed that part. Volley resolves, and Thrasios dies. Ryan moves to combat and attacks Chris with Ob Nixilis and his bird. In response, Chris casts March of Swirling Mist, where X equals 2, targeting both creatures. They both phase out, and Ryan passes. At the end of Ryan's turn, Chris casts Worldly Tutor, fetching up a Hullbreaker Horror onto the top of his library. Chris untaps with Mark through Seedborn. Mark draws and casts a Stride Hanger Automaton. He recasts his commander, Magda. In response, Chris activates the One Ring, adding a counter and drawing 6 cards. Then Chris hard casts Force of Will, countering Magda. Mark crews High-Speed Hoverbike and moves to combat. He attacks Chris with Hoverbike. In response, Chris casts Abrupt Decay, destroying Hoverbike. Finished up, Mark ships the turn. During his upkeep, Chris loses 6 life to the One Ring. He draws and activates the One Ring, adding a counter and drawing 7 cards. He plays a Command Tower for turn. He casts Hullbreaker Horror. He casts Mana Vault. Hullbreaker Horror triggers, and Chris bounces Chrome Mox back to his hand. He floats mana from Mana Vault, then recasts Chrome Mox. Hullbreaker triggers, bouncing Mana Vault back to his hand. Chrome Mox resolves, but he doesn't imprint anything. He presents a loop of continually bouncing and recasting both Chrome Mox and Mana Vault, floating mana each time. He adds infinite colorless mana. He recasts his commander, Thrasios. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Soul Ring into his hand. He presents another loop of activating Thrasios over and over, drawing his deck and putting all lands onto the battlefield tapped. He casts Thassa's Oracle. Oracle enters, and Chris wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what an awesome game. The most valuable card in tonight's game, sponsored by Luxury Playstyle, goes to Cursed Totem. This card fell out of favor for years when CEDH became so quick. Tonight's game showed us how powerful this card is in the current meta. It stopped Magda, Thrasios, and even Ryan's Hope of Ghirapur. Over and over again, it was proving to be a huge barrier for players to push through in tonight's game. A big thanks to everyone who played with us at MagicCon Chicago this year. We have more videos from the convention coming, so stay tuned. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.